This episode has very sensitive topics, is for mature audiences only, and contains depictions of various forms of trauma. Viewer discretion advised.
I just want to die. I just wanted to give up at that point. I felt like I was suffocating and I couldn't do anything right. And I felt like I'd exhausted every avenue in my life and there was nothing left for me. I felt like I was demonic and I had all these evil spirits inside of me. My seizures, for instance, they were made to be a spiritual aspect. That somehow God was punishing me. If I just prayed hard enough and had enough, I guess, release, you would say, in the spirit, God would miraculously heal me of those things. And I had just decided by what I was told I must be a child of Satan because nothing I did somehow got rid of my seizures, my health issues. I just didn't believe hard enough. I didn't pray hard enough. When my doctor went in for the final surgery, she said, "I'm not a forensic doctor, Rachel. I can't say anything on record." She said, "So nothing I say could ever help you if you wanted to form a case against any of your abusers." But she said the amount of internal damage you have to your cervix, everything inside, she's like, you have so much scarring that she said, "I can tell that you've had multiple failed pregnancies." It just felt like my abusers took that final thing from me, that final thing I was holding on to so hard.
Yeah.
I feel like my whole life I was a sexual object to be played with from childhood until into my adulthood. And I was just broken.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you would like to see our faces, it would be so awesome if you could go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness and join in on the conversation. Remember, these are real people coming on and telling their stories. They are sharing the deepest, darkest secrets of their life, and it just means so much when I see those words of encouragement for our guests, those positive comments. It boosts the algorithm. It makes our guests feel validated and seen, and it's just so nice of you to do that. So today's guest, we had her on previously, and there just was so much more that I wanted to get into. I felt like we had to cut the conversation short. I wanted to go into some more details of her life and also more of the deconstruction process from leaving the Mennonites and various Amish churches that she was a part of. If you want to pause and go watch the first half, you're more than welcome to, but you aren't necessarily going to need to, because we'll give a little update synopsis of what we talked about in the previous episode. If you're coming from that episode now, you can skip ahead in the chapter marks so you don't have to hear the synopsis. So I'm just going to bring her on first. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel Carter.
Thanks for having me back. I was so nervous before and I felt like all I did was ramble.
You did such a good job. I was like, please come back. You were great. And I wanted to talk more because I feel like I kind of pushed us to the end a little prematurely. And I felt like there was so much more to get into in your story in California. So first, for those who haven't seen the previous episode, this is a little synopsis of what we talked about. So Rachel grew up in a very abusive and neglectful home life that was not necessarily religious. And because of that, she really found solace and comfort and love in various Mennonite churches. She unfortunately continued to be perpetually abused within every church that she was sent to. She was trafficked all over the place. She was sent to this troubled women's home that was also very abusive. And at every single turn, it seemed like she just could not catch a break. And we sort of ended the story when she went to California, and it's this church that basically is a Mennonite breakoff of kind of the same type of teachings, but the Mennonite church said that they didn't really appreciate what they were talking about, and so they kind of split and did their own thing and used people's trauma to lure them in, but essentially not give them the help that they needed, not give them the true trauma-informed support that someone might need, and re-traumatize them in a new way. So we're going to get more into that church, into the California church, and then also just further discuss what it was like deconstructing from the Mennonites, what it took for her to really decide to break away after being invested in it for so long and really dedicated and devout to that religion, and what those repercussions are after you leave, how those friendships either evolve, change, disintegrate, and what people think of how she is doing now and what she is doing now. So with all of that being said, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We could just get into the next part.
Okay, perfect. You're amazing. All right, so let's talk about this place in California. So you had mentioned to me that they were kind of this Mennonite group, and they decided to break off and do their own thing because the Mennonite church wasn't really cool with the rules they were breaking. So let's get into a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I met this church group, or I met the leaders of this church group in Pennsylvania. At this point in my life, I had basically vowed to never go to another retreat ever again because I was so tired of hearing about hurting people and it didn't feel productive anymore. I never really felt like I walked away from these retreats feeling helped. So one of my friends got me talked into going out to this retreat. The wife was heading it on, and this was out in Pennsylvania. So we drove out and we stayed at one of the Mennonite, essentially like a little, almost like a mini college campus kind of thing, like where they'd hold Bible schools and stuff. And so there was kind of dorms where ladies could stay. It was an all ladies retreat. This lady got up and started talking, and I don't quite remember how it all played in as far as I remember for some reason wanting to meet with her. Like, I really could relate to her story, and I was a very musical person, and I had felt like I had just lost my passion for music over the years. She had also spoken about getting her voice back, and I decided to meet with her. They prayed over me, and I was more into like the spiritual awareness, calling out spirits, things like that, naming things, like everything had to have a name. I was a little bit more into that and that part of my life. I don't know. I do remember like praying, and she just said, I feel like the Lord is telling me that, you're going to get your song back, and then you need to sing a song like in front of this women's group. And oh my word, the amount of anxiety this brought me.
Yeah.
But I did. I ended up getting up and singing a song that she had written because that's literally the only thing that came to my mind at that moment and that I actually had the words to. It kind of started us off on our journey because I really did feel like I just felt like this outpouring of love and understanding. It was very drawing, everything that I had experienced there. And I related to a lot of women there. And I just remember like sitting on the swings before we left, and this wife coming up, and she just said, I really want you to visit us in California. I really feel like there'd be a place for you there. And I was very much against it. But again, I kind of listened to one of my friends who pushed me, and she's like, I think this would be good for you. You really connected to her. And so I did. I went out to visit. Some of my friends paid my flight out. I went out to visit my service dog and I, and met with them. And they were like, we just think that you would make an amazing worship leader out here. We're building our church. And the church didn't really look necessarily like a Mennonite church in any way. She still dressed not really ultra conservative, but they had come out of a conservative Eastern church. The rest of their church, they were kind of just odds and ends kind of people that had collected in over the years, and some people from non Anabaptist backgrounds. Some people came from some pretty conservative backgrounds. It wasn't long later that I ended up choosing to move out there. I decided I wanted to escape Holmes County anyways. So I thought maybe I could start over out there. I lived out there for about a year, but the longer I was there, the more red flags just went up in my mind.
Mm.
Things were over spiritualized trauma, like for myself. Things that were brought up were things like my seizures, for instance. They were made to be a spiritual aspect, that somehow God was punishing me in a way, and that if I just prayed hard enough and had enough, I guess, release, you would say, in the spirit, God would like miraculously heal me of those things. And I really struggled with that because in my mind, I kept wondering, what am I doing wrong? Like in the back of my head, I just kept thinking, I'm just not good enough for God yet. I'm not good enough for God yet. And there was a lot of spiritual things in my life because over the years, there'd been so much abuse and so many strongholds that were in my life that I did feel like they played a part in a lot of freedom. I did learn to use my voice, but once I learned to use my voice, I felt like they did their best to shut me up.
Mm.
All of a sudden, me speaking out and saying, I don't quite agree with this teaching or something, you have a Jezebel spirit. You're a controlling woman. You couldn't disagree with the teachings being brought. And there was another family that moved out about the same time I did, and I really grew to love that family. Uh, the the mom and dad, they were super relatable, down to earth. Like, I had so much fun with that family, and they were welcome into the church, and we had a party, I would say, for the first 6 months we were there. We were learning, we felt like we were growing, and then it started to just feel like we escaped one religion to create a new one. So, like, we left this conservative Anabaptism, but now we were essentially creating, like, I think sometimes when you focus so much on not being like something, you almost become like it, but it just has a different image.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what's interesting is she asked you to go there and be in a sort of leader capacity. So I'm imagining that after everything that you've gone through, after being shuffled and trafficked from place to place to place and being punished for certain things, this probably felt really good to you or really enticing to want to go and be a thought leader of sorts and kind of take control of your life. And then you found that it just kind of turned on you. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's really how it felt. Like, when I went out, I remember having that feeling of I'm finally seen and heard, because my whole life I wanted the things that I went through to be helpful to others. And I remember I used to have dreams that I was going to stand up and help girls who were struggling, and I really had a passion for that. So it took a little bit before I was asked to actually be part of their team that flew back to like Pennsylvania and would host these retreats and conferences. And it did. It made me feel good. But something also just felt kind of wrong about it. Like, we would like prepare to go out and do these conferences, and I remember being told, you can't talk about everything we do here because they're not spiritual enough to understand what we do. And I was just like, but to me, Jesus is supposed to be simple. Like, we're supposed to meet them at their level. So how are we too spiritual? Or and in the beginning, I think I agreed with it because I thought, I'm a people pleaser. And I was like, yeah, we're too spiritual because I've learned all these things. And but then I would go back and I would see the people that I called my people, because I would have still referred to myself as beachy at that time. I felt like our intent was just to tear the churches apart. It wasn't to root out abuse or root out the problems in the church or the ways the churches were doing wrong. It was basically creating a following, trying
Mm,
to just convince them that their way was completely wrong and that our way was right. And spiritualizing trauma, like naming trauma had to have a spirit. We had all kinds of spirits. We had Jezebel spirits and Baal spirits and Leviathan spirits and Python spirits, and like we had all these spirits, and we just like would pray with people. And I would get asked after I'd come out of a prayer room with a girl, like, so how far did you get with them? Like, did they renounce all these things? And I was like, that wasn't my goal in the prayer room. My goal was to make them feel safe and heard. And so then my position got taken back. Like, one by one, it was, you know, you're not doing what we want, so we're not going to like give you as much freedom. Or like when you speak to people, we want you to speak about like what you're learning in the ministry here and not really what God is doing in your life. And then when we go home, some flags I was seeing was we were going and we were mostly talking to women. The husband would have some time for the husbands or the fathers.
mm,
But then back at home, we didn't seem to attract a lot of women to the ministry. We mostly attract boys and men. And some flags that I saw there was I was seeing counseling happen with the wife and these boys that were about my age at the time. I was in my upper 20s. So some of these boys were moving in from different parts of the states or had already moved there. They were working for the husband's business, and then she was counseling just her and them. And I don't know, it just felt off to me. And I don't know if that just like I still struggle a little bit because I came from such a conservative culture where I was in it for so long that you always preach about, avoid the appearance of evil. And I don't know, just it just felt so odd to me that she would stay up late at night with these boys and young men. And I understand mothering people, but it took it to a whole nother level. And it seemed like the girls that came, it was something was always wrong with us. I don't know, it just things just didn't feel right. And we'd have married men come and they would counsel with the wife, and somehow something was always wrong with the wife. It wasn't the husband, it was just the wife. And so she would counsel with them, and if wives stood up and said something doesn't feel right about this, it was, you're controlling, you have this Jezebel spirit and you need to renounce this. And it took me to a place that I shut down so hard
Yeah.
that I'll never forget. And I don't have a lot of recollection of this instance, but the other family that stayed there, he made a comment to me after we left. He said, "Rachel, I'll never forget the day that I showed up to do some construction on their house, and you were in the basement and you were in a fetal ball on the floor, and you just said, I just want to die. Like I just
Mm.
wanted to give up at that point because I felt like I was suffocating and I couldn't do anything right. And I felt like I had exhausted every avenue in my life and there was nothing left for me. I felt like I was demonic and I had all these evil spirits inside of me. And I had just decided by what I was told I must be a child of Satan
Oh,
because nothing I did somehow got rid of my seizures. Nothing I did got rid of my health issues. Like I just didn't believe hard enough. I didn't pray hard enough. And I was just broken.
wow. So you had mentioned off camera that they really painted themselves as a trauma facility or a place where people should go to get help. But then what they're doing is further exacerbating people's trauma and making them believe that they're demonic or making them believe that they're inherently wrong or worthless. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, I saw a lot of that, and I saw a lot of married relationships not necessarily being restored, but being almost split apart because the spiritualness, I don't know, it was just like anytime he read about a new spirit, suddenly everyone had this new spirit and they needed to have it taken care of. And it got to this point that I started speaking out and I started asking church people, like, something just isn't like something isn't right. I started using my voice. There was one Sunday that I actually went to a different church, which was frowned upon, and I got a message, a voice message on the way back home or back to the house from someone who attended the service that day, and it was this recording of the husband standing up in church and saying, anyone who believes this girl needs to repent. that that I have a divisive spirit, and that anyone who believes me with the things that I'm saying about what's happening in their home and the way that they're performing this ministry, because even what was happening in the house was not known about in the church, the way that they were doing things. And so people started questioning it and asking questions.
Like what?
Well, just like the way that she would counsel boys by herself.
Mm.
Like that was a red flag to people in their church. Like that was frowned upon, but they didn't know about those things. Or when we would come back from retreats in the conservative churches, the things she relayed to the church weren't always the things that we did. We would go around anointing churches because these churches had all these demonic spirits, and like we'd anoint all the benches, and we would, I mean, it was a whole thing. Like, but we would come home and we would paint this pretty picture of deliverance, and like none of that stuff happened.
Right. What do you think was the goal of this woman and her husband with this church?
Honestly, I feel like they started off in a good place. I feel like their goal in the beginning was really to help people. I feel like deep down that is probably still the goal. I feel like they got wrapped up in the power that came from it, the following that came from it, and I don't know, I'm the person that I'd like to think that I try to think of the best in people. And I feel like their hearts were in a good place, but the teachings just jumped off the deep end and the power got to them and
Mm.
everyone was wrong but them.
Did they ever have actual trauma-informed clinical therapists or people who were trained to help these people with their traumas?
No, when you would ask them how they got free from some of their own trauma, you would get responses like, well, it was just me and Jesus. Like, it was just me and Jesus. Or I know that they received some what we would call training from other conservative or ex-conservative people that also, like, you've probably heard of a lot of there's lots of ministries in the conservative churches that put on trauma teaching, and they'll teach about generational curses and how to break them. They'll teach about so one of the things I was told was that they had the backing of a pretty well-known person that does a lot of conferences throughout the conservative churches, and they really spiritualize. They deal mostly with trauma in a spiritual way. And they believe that all healing is done through breaking generational curses, breaking strongholds, breaking any attachments. Like they would believe that, if you kept anything that was from your abuser, any gifts or anything, that those would hold spiritual attachments and that you need to destroy those things immediately. If I would keep anything, let's say from an abusive parent, I would need to get rid of those things immediately because those had spiritual attachments that would be hindering my life.
Mm.
A lot of it was, faith healing. Your baptism didn't count if that leader was, in any way in disagreement with what their church believed. And so there was rebaptism. Like I got rebaptized again. And the unfortunate part was when I did choose to leave California, the people back home, when I drove home, there was just no support. It was just, I was made out to be this rebellious person that just couldn't get along anywhere because I couldn't agree with these people because they were so sold on what these people taught. And I watched marriages and people almost be destroyed. Like people become so suicidal. And so many of the people that were there when I was are gone now. They're not following their teachings anymore. And I wish people would then look at that. Sometimes it's hard for me to look back and not want an apology from people who didn't believe me when I said these things were happening. And now they see it and they'll accept that those things happened, but they'll never acknowledge that what you went through happened or that they were wrong in how they dealt with you.
Yeah.
Like I was really held at arm's length when I came home from California to Holmes County because, yeah, my voice wasn't heard and I just shut off and I isolated.
Mm-hmm. Wow, the fact that they said over the pulpit to not believe you and not interact with you, how isolating. I can't imagine the betrayal you must have felt when you heard that recording.
There was a lot of emotions. Part of me felt angry. I was just like, come on, wake up, people. Like at this point, if I'm so powerful, little old me, if I'm so powerful that you're being told to not believe me, like, and at that point I did start recording a lot of conversations between myself and the leaders there when we had meetings because I was really tired of the he said she said. And if I could
Yeah.
say, oh, I produced this, like, here, would you like to listen to it? And a lot of people didn't even need to listen to it. It was just the fact that I had a recording and was willing to produce it. People are like, oh, maybe we should wake up and listen, because it was just like up until that point. I Yeah, I was so tired of being like, oh, well, she was yelling and cussing at me, and then I was like, listen to this recording. I remember playing it to one of the other leaders in the church and them just sitting there like mouth ajar, like, oh, yeah, you didn't even say anything. You literally were silent the entire time. And I said, because I learned that speaking got me nowhere.
Mm.
And like different times that we'd get together to try to, even for like worship time, we'd get together and, we were supposed to be there and be on a team, but it wasn't a team. It was anything they said went. And you were just supposed to listen and follow in line.
Yeah.
And I just find it sad because, yeah, I'm very thankful to have the friends that I made outside of the church there because, even with some of my health issues, collapsing at my job down the road and being brought home and being, having my boss told that, oh, she just does this sometimes. And here I was taken to the hospital and had a major pelvic infection. Oh, but
Wow.
she just does these things. And I just remember the wife leaning into the vehicle and like wanting to hug me and pray over me, and I just kept saying, don't touch me, don't touch me. And then I was told that I had a divisive spirit because I didn't want to be touched. I was in pain. I did not want to be touched.
Oh.
And that's essentially how we left in California. Was I drew a boundary and I decided I did not want to be touched anymore because I felt like anytime there was a disagreement, it was, I'm going to come cuddle with you or hug you. And those are the things that my heart desired, that mothering love, the father love, the mother love. And like one story that I don't know if it will ever leave my mind, I still have nightmares about it, was I remember being in my room in the house. I was really struggling with fear from my past. And I was afraid of I've always struggled with this fear of being raped. Like
Mm.
it is a thing that I've struggled with my whole life of what if that would happen again. And I remember the husband coming down and I was crying and I just did not want him standing in my bedroom door because I'd had an abuser that would come stand in my bedroom door. And I asked him, I verbalized, please not do that. And that I didn't really want him in my room at that time. I had a pretty small room. And he's like, why? What have I done to you? And I said, nothing. This is what I'm struggling with right now. I'm struggling with these feelings of of fear of being raped or being harmed, and I know that you've never done that to me. He goes, who have I ever raped? Like, why would you think I'm going to rape you? Like, I've never done something like that. And it was just, I never accused you of it.
Yeah.
And that night I was given an ultimatum because of my feelings. They basically was like, you either pray and kind of get past this, or you're going to have to leave. You're going to have to leave our house.
Wow.
After being told, this is my forever home, you know?
Oh my gosh, it's so aggravating that they couldn't just understand. They couldn't have any sort of compassion or empathy. Just lacking zero self-awareness in what you were going through and how he was contributing to those feelings, and not understanding what a trigger is, not understanding people who have gone through trauma, that things come up, and the fact that they're blaming you, further victim blaming you for having these trauma responses. Wow, that's awful.
Yeah, and as an adult, I remember that night because I had I had these bunk beds in my room and I just wanted to feel safe for a little bit and I felt like this, you know, I think I was 27, 28 at the time. I crawled under my bottom bunk on the floor and I scooted myself all the way to the wall like I did when I was a child
Mm,
and just smashed myself against the wall and covered my face in my blanket and just cried because I just wanted to block the world out and feel safe for a little bit. And I don't know, that was me reverting back into how I protected myself as a little kid.
yeah,
I just didn't feel safe anymore.
that's so hard. And how long after that did you decide to leave?
It was within a couple weeks. I ended up essentially packing while they weren't home one day. I was actually supposed to go teach school in Colorado. I had been asked to teach, and they decided, like the people there in California decided that was a good move for me. So I'd already gone to Colorado to visit because I was going to teach at a little private Mennonite school, and I don't know, just everything built up, and I was tired of being called divisive, and I just packed what I could in my vehicle with my dog and drove to a friend's house for the night, said goodbye, and sorry, I'm gonna get emotional.
That's okay.
I just felt like a failure and a disappointment to like I have such a photographic memory that I remember telling my friends goodbye and wondering am I ever going to see any of them again? Knowing that anything I did in that moment was going to be taken out of context and putting all my things into boxes and thinking this is going to be how the rest of my life is. I will never be safe. I will always be fighting to stay alive mentally and emotionally. And I remember, like, I drove to a friend's house. She let me spend the night at her house. I slept on her couch. She was actually my chiropractor at the time. And sleeping on the couch and starting for home the next day. Just, I don't know how far I got out of Sacramento before I just stopped on the side of the road and sobbed and just thought, I have nowhere to go. Like, nowhere is home anymore.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that my relationships did not end in California. And that, a lot of the friends that I had out there that I made outside of the church there are still some of my very good friends to this day, and I've gotten to see quite a few of them.
Hmm.
But I would say California really changed me in a way that I wasn't sure I wanted to do. That was probably one of the things that really pushed me to the edge of I don't think I want to do Mennonite anymore. I don't think I want to do this anymore. I don't want to play dress up anymore. I don't want to pretend to be somebody I'm not, and I don't even know who I am. Inside, I had shut off everything I loved. I shut off music. I came home and I remember people at church saying, "You don't sing anymore." And I remember thinking, "What's the point? Like, what's the point of singing?" Um, everything just felt dead.
Yeah. Did they ever push you to get married? Because you were older, and I know according to some churches, they're like, oh, you spinster when you hit 24. So, did anyone ever push you into that?
No, I had dated one Mennonite boy for a short time. No, thankfully, I'm not really good marriage material. I
According to them.
um I say that like I had been told different times that people weren't sure that they would want their child to marry me because I came from the outside. Because what if I would choose to leave?
Mm,
And then my spouse would be left, which is kind of stupid because when I look at the numbers of people that leave the churches, most of the time it's men and not women. So me coming from the outside does not make a difference whether or not I would leave or not. But no, I was never pushed towards marriage.
is that something that you wanted?
Yes and no. I think I wanted the safety that I thought would come from having my own family. I also wanted to redeem. I was given a really small window of time from my doctors to be able to have children.
Mm,
And because I had gone through a lot of abuse starting as a toddler, um, sexual abuse, it really messed up a lot of things for me.
mm,
And I wanted a family, and I thought if I could redeem all that pain, like I just thought if I could have my own children, if I could hold my own living baby, somehow that would redeem all the pain I'd gone through. And that was probably one of the most crushing things for me that I struggled with. I think 4 years, 4 or 5 years. I think I was 29. I ended up having to have 3 pelvic surgeries.
oh, wow.
And the more they read statistics, they say, I think it's in the 70%, like 73% of women who have been sexually abused end up with endometriosis, which is considered an autoimmune condition. And I had 3 pelvic surgeries and ended up having to have a hysterectomy.
Mm,
And when my doctor went in for the final surgery, she said, I'm not a forensic doctor, Rachel. So she said, I can't say anything on record. She said, so nothing I say could ever help you if you wanted to form a case against any of your abusers. But she said the amount of internal damage you have to your cervix, to, just everything inside. She's like, you have so much scarring. She said, your tissue doesn't move like tissue should. And she just said, even like my uterus, she said there was so much scarring inside of my uterus that she said, I can tell that you've had multiple failed pregnancies. And she's like, I think you made the right decision for yourself to finally end, because I really wanted children. That was really where my heart was. I really wanted children. But I just finally came to the point of, I said, what kind of mother would I even be if I'm always in this much pain?
mm,
And yeah, I just had so much trauma. I was just in pain all the time. And it took years of physical therapy, even after my surgeries, to try to help some of that pain be better because of all the physical trauma my body had gone through, and just reproductive trauma. And like 3 weeks after my last surgery, I mentally crashed. And my now landlord, bless her heart, she she came out to my house. I was in a fetal ball on my floor, and I just thought, I'm not a woman anymore.
mm,
Like these people took everything from me. That's how I felt. Like I I just thought, like, somehow I just felt like less of a woman. I no longer can have children. No man is ever going to want me because I can't have children, because I had grown to the concept of that's our role as a woman, right? In the
right.
culture, our woman is to our womanly, you know, goals in marriage is we're supposed to produce a family, and like my job is to satisfy a man and to have babies and raise them in a godly manner and bring them into the church and grow the church. And I can't do any of that anymore. So what is left? And she just scooped me up in her arms, and she's like, that's not who God says you are. She's like, God doesn't see you that way. He's like, she goes, you're still a woman and you're loved. And she's like, I don't know what to do in this moment, but she's like, if you were my daughter, and she just scooped me up and held me like I was this little girl in her arms. And I
Mm,
just sobbed. But it was so healing for me to have that love. It really did. It was definitely a grief process after all of that, of struggling with it. Just felt like my abusers took that final thing from me, that final thing I was holding on to so hard.
yeah.
And now that was gone too. I just I remember telling someone that I feel like my whole life I was a sexual object to be played with from childhood until into my adulthood. Like in the church, women are sexualized. Our hair is sexualized. It's our job to keep men pure. Like somehow the way we walk, the way we dress, any shape our body has, like we just cause men to stumble. Trying to essentially like unlearn all of those belief systems is so incredibly hard, especially it's just been pushed.
Hmm.
You get in trouble for your dress. Little girls getting their legs slapped because 2 and 3 years old, they're playing, and heaven forbid their dress go up, and instead of throwing some shorts or some leggings on, let's slap legs and say, modesty, keep your dress down. And it just feels like you're just sexualizing like your whole life. And even just thinking of my hair, I remember being told multiple times, I shouldn't leave my hair hanging in a home where somebody is not my father or my brother, which I'm not related to anybody in the church, because my hair could turn a boy on. It could turn a husband on. So I need to keep it up and hidden and covered, and that's why we're supposed to cover it. And in so many instances of abuse, my hair was grabbed and pulled, and now I have no hair. No one's gonna grab no one's no one's gonna grab my hair again. And don't worry, I've already been scrutinized for it. I've been called plenty of names, and I've been called a lesbian and all kinds of fun things. I've kind of
Jeez.
turned it into a joke with some of my girlfriends now about, when people talk about my short haircut. And I said, no, I said it really stems from I don't want anyone to be able to grab my hair ever again and use it against me.
Yeah.
There's no ponytail to grab anymore. And I remember my hairstylist when I went in, she goes, I know you've wanted to do this for a long time, but you were so scared because it's been so ingrained in me that, you know, that hair is, I need to cover it up. And I was like, it was so freeing for me when I cried when she started shaving it off because I was a little stressed out about it.
Mm,
But in the end, it just felt so freeing to be like, this will never happen again.
yeah. I think your hair is amazing. I love it. And I love that you made that choice for yourself. And it's such a power move. I think anything that you can do, that's usually the first thing that people do is play with their appearance once they leave these high control groups because it's a fairly safe thing to kind of play with. It's not drugs or alcohol. It's like, okay, it's just hair. It'll grow back if I don't like it. And I think it's such a fun way to learn how to express yourself and take back that power, even if it's just a little bit of power and a little bit of control, a little bit of self sovereignty. I think it's such a great way to really come into yourself.
Yeah, definitely, because I feel like for a lot of us, most of our life, every little aspect about us was controlled. Everything was outlined for us. Everything was um, black and white in a standard book. No sharp object is to come to your hair. I was in churches where no sharp object was to touch your beard. Thankfully, I can't grow one of those, but it is. And starting to like when I look at the deconstruction process, I'm very fresh still in my deconstruction process and learning to take apart. And it was kind of interesting. I made a friend through where I work who has been so good for me. She challenges everything I believe, and not in a bad way. Like, she's curious about why I believe the things I do because she doesn't come from, any conservative backgrounds. And she's gone through her own stuff, so she can, and she's so smart. She's so smart, and she has knowledge about so many different topics and different religions and things like that. And she often will play the devil's advocate in why I believe something. And it's really made me step back and look at things in a different way. For example, like when it came to my hair, it was in my head, it was just a heaven or hell issue. Like if I did something to my hair, somehow I was going to instantly like end up in hell if I would die in a car crash or something. And so she was like, show me in your Bible. Show me. Where is it that it says that? And it really did set me into like reading, and not just reading my King James, because, that's the only right book out there is the King James version. It set me back to getting out that big old fat concordance and looking at Hebrew and looking at Greek and deciding that there's many applications for scripture, and that scripture really isn't black and white. It's not as black and white as I was made to believe it was. It's very gray.
Mm.
And that is the purpose of having that relationship with Christ, is that the Holy Spirit talks to each of us. He has expectations for each of us in what we're supposed to do. And I even had to step away from church culture. I haven't gone to church in quite a while because I go into a church house and feel instant anxiety.
Yeah.
I can't sit through a service at this point in my life without feeling extreme panic. And I've had fingers pointed that that's just because I'm living in sin. That's just because I'm not doing what scripture tells me to do, because, of course they say that scripture tells you that, fellowship, you're supposed to fellowship with other believers, and that if you're a Christian, you'll essentially go back to obeying all these standards. To me, I had to decide that the church is bigger than four walls.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't like that. And there has been I have watched a lot of my relationships dissolve because of my choice to leave the conservative churches. I'm not like excommunicated or anything like that. I didn't actually, it's kind of funny, but the last church I was part of that I was actually a member of has essentially dissolved. So my membership is just in limbo. Like, I don't belong anywhere, and it's kind of handy. But I have experienced some shunning from some of the people I would have called my friends, not to the extreme as what some people may face, but very much pushback of they don't really want to spend time with me unless it's for trying to get me back or win me back.
Yeah.
And that has been hard. Some of my closest friends, seeing my relationships change, and it's been hard to make friends outside of the church.
Yeah. We've only been gone 2 years.
Yeah, I would have left. I believe it was the spring that I turned 30, and I'm 32, and I don't turn 33 until January. So, yeah, I'm still very fresh out. And even actually after I quit church and quit physical church, I still dressed plain for probably, I probably stopped dressing conservative, like cape dress and everything, probably a year ago, maybe.
Mm.
And every now and then when I was visiting like up north in Holmes County or something, I would still throw it back on because it was just easier to blend in. Now that I don't have any hair, though, it wouldn't make sense for me to throw one on because I'd really stand out. But
So what was that like for you, putting on worldly clothes, like jeans
ooh,
or that cool sweatshirt you have on?
it's been hard. I hate shopping. I hate clothes, just in general. Like, that sounded really weird, but I I'm not a fashionista. Like, when you live in a culture where everything is dictated for you, like the style of dress, how many pleats your covering has, the type of fabric you can have, like the color, the stripes, like it is very hard for me to wear solids. Like, most of my sweater is solid except for this little top part. Almost every shirt I own is solid because I don't know, I put on these prints and I hear this like play in my head of, Rachel, does what you wear on the outside portray a meek and quiet spirit inside?
Oh my
Because it
goodness.
was like, if your flowers were too big, the focus was on my clothing and not my spirit and my character. And I'm like, clothes are supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
So pants was hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing felt like it fit right. Like, I had my cape dress was fit to me and it covered everything up that I didn't want to show. And so it's still a challenge for me to. Usually I let my friends pick out my clothes. It just works better that way. I think I need to hire somebody that came out of the culture just to go clothes shopping for me so that I have some clothes to wear. But
I
yeah, it has been a challenge.
mean, that's okay. I can understand that. When you have someone tell you exactly what to wear, I know a lot of times getting out of these groups, you can get decision fatigue very easily because you've always been told exactly what to do, what to think, how to dress, how to be.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden you have all these choices and it can be overwhelming to just decide for yourself. And that's okay to just take your time and let people shop for you. I think that's a great shirt. Great choice. I think it makes your countenance brighter. It shows your personality.
Thanks. I actually let one of my friends over the weekend put makeup on me for the first time.
Oh wow, how
So,
was that?
well, one of my friends said, "It looks like you have a filter on."
Oh.
And I was just like, I remember looking at myself and I'm like, I'm not a super girly person. I'm very much a tomboy. I like to play in the dirt. Like even when I wore dresses, I always had pants on underneath. Like, yeah, I always wanted to have some kind of like shorts on or something because I am not girly. And I did get that way a little bit more before leaving was, hey, anything a guy can do, I can do it in a dress. Just watch me. Actually, that's one of my favorite songs I have on my Spotify list was essentially like I could do anything you do in a dress. Like, watch me as a woman. And it was a super powerful song to me, too, because I was just like, I, I'm supposed to be, as a woman, I'm supposed to be, quiet and meek. And
Hmm.
it is definitely, it's had its challenges. And um, some days I would like to just throw a dress back on because it would be easier. But I'm, I'm happy for all the changes. And I do understand decision fatigue is such a real thing of trying to yeah, there we don't realize how many decisions there are outside of when people dictated how we lived our lives and everything we did. And sometimes I would just be like, be nice if someone would just tell me what to do.
Yeah, I feel like that'll fade for you. I say give it a couple years and you won't want to go back to people telling you what to do. I understand the comfort in it now, but that's my bet. So in 3 years, I'm gonna call you and be like, "Hey, how are those decisions going?"
Well, I did make some pretty outlandish like choices the last year or so. Like shortly after I stopped wearing conservative clothes, I was like, I need a challenge. Like I need to focus on something that is a challenge. And so, as someone who has seizures, they're pretty controlled now, but I still have a service. I have a retired service dog and I have a current service dog. I was like, I am going to go get a scuba certification. I'm going to learn how to scuba dive.
I love that for you. I'm scuba certified, and there's something so beautiful and serene about just being deep in the ocean and being able to breathe underwater and just this freedom, but also complete terror.
Yes, actually, it was really funny because one of my friends who took me to the Discover Scuba course, she's like, Rachel, I don't think I've ever seen you so calm. And I said, I'm pretty sure I was supposed to be born a mermaid.
Yeah.
And when I was just down in Texas here a few weeks ago, I discovered that you can take mermaid certificate courses.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm going to do this. I was like, I am going to get a mermaid tail. And I was like, this would be so much fun. I just need a few more dives and I can actually go help at our local aquarium and scuba dive in their tanks. And,
Yes.
but you have to remember, Jaleese, I live in Ohio where the only thing we have to dive in is a 60-degree quarry in the summer.
Oh,
It is
geez.
cold and it is green and it is dark.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to come to California.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, there's just been different things I started doing to try to take my life back. I started voice lessons
Amazing.
just for no really reason, just because and I told the vocal teacher, she's like, "So what are your long-term goals?" And I said, "I just want to learn to feel the freedom in music that I used to feel." And it has been great. I do 2 lessons a month and there's like no end goal, but it's just been so good for me. And it's like wakes up these little pieces in you that are just kind of shut down. And scuba diving, making those challenges and planning my little vacations, like I'm planning a trip to Georgia and my dogs. I train dogs. I put my business on hold. I own an LLC where I do actually train dogs, and I had to put my business on hold to focus on my younger dog because she was having some struggles with the seizure alert and
Mm.
everything, and so I needed to stop putting her on the back burner. And so I do get into a lot of dog training with other people. I get into some dog training groups, and we just have a party. That's great.
That's so cool. I think I need your expertise for our wiener here because we just went live like 2 nights ago, and this little guy was barking on the live, and I was like, "Shh, Oscar." I was like, he's got such short
Yeah,
man
good luck.
syndrome. This little Oscar Mayer wiener that he is so insecure when he sees other dogs, and he's like, "If I wasn't on this leash right now, I bet I'd show you what's up if I wasn't on this leash."
There's a couple breeds. I always say wiener dogs are one of the harder breeds to. I'll take one of those high drive Malinois any day over a wiener dog.
Yeah, he's a tricky little wiener.
They do. They have a personality of their own.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're doing so many awesome things and just exploring and having fun and going on adventures and doing the scary things. That's really hard to do when you're in a group like that. And you've just broken through the mold and you are just coming into yourself in such a beautiful way. And I just love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It Yeah, I have a lot more hope than I used to, and I look forward to my future and seeing what it brings and the new challenges I'll get. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy for all the people I've gotten to meet, and I have a bucket list of people that I still want to meet that are even just advocates for like you, there's other people
Oh,
that I see advocate for people coming out of the plane circles and advocating for people still in the plane circles that are
yeah.
struggling. And so I have my bucket list of people to meet yet.
Who is it? Who? Let me know.
I would, I don't know. Jasper Hoffman rates pretty high at the top of my list. Fellow horse girl.
Jasper's amazing.
And
Uh huh.
I love watching her Instagram stories because I watch her do all the things that I want to do.
Uh huh.
And like, I'm just like, that's the girl I'm going to send clothing shopping for me.
She has style. She does.
She has got style, and I just love her. I love her passion for life. Like,
Yeah.
she's got so much pizzazz.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna email her. I'm gonna say, hey, I got someone who wants to meet you.
I figure we'll cross paths eventually because I know she comes up to Ohio every now and then, and I just keep hoping she'll cross through Columbus and, you know, want to meet this boring ex-Mennonite girl over here in Plain City.
Well, girl, you are anything but boring. I've absolutely loved our conversation. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I don't think so. I think I'm pretty wrapped up.
Okay.
I'm tired. This has been a very it's been a huge emotional roller coaster.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on this ride not once but twice so that we can all learn from you and your experiences. And I just really appreciate you sharing. It means a lot to us.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I guess I just hope that by doing this, that if one person hears my story and just feels hope, that that's worth it to me.
Yeah, you're a rock star. Well, thanks again. And we need another Linda Listen moment, sassy statement, as a viral video with the toddler goes, or something inspirational. Anything you want.
Linda, listen, you keep your hands off my faux hawk and leave it alone. No.
Yes. And it's amazing. And if you're going to talk bad about it, then you can stay out of her life. That's me being protective over you. Like you need it, but you know. All right. Well, this has been awesome. Guys, if you want to contact Rachel, you can find her on Instagram at RachelCarter14, link in the description below. And make sure to leave those words of encouragement, those comments. We love to hear your thoughts, and our guests do read the comments, and it makes their day. So thank you for all those kind words. And we have the best community ever. And do you have any other final thoughts? Did I already ask you that?
You did, but I just, you were talking about the comments. One thing I did want to put out there was I was reading through some of the comments, which is probably kind of dangerous, on some of your other posts. And one thing I would like for listeners to understand is just because it doesn't happen in your church doesn't mean it's not happening somewhere.
Preach.
I saw quite a few comments. I saw quite a few comments of people saying that, Shalise is only picking the most extreme out there, but if you truly open your ears and listen, you will realize how many cases there are inside. And I'm only speaking for conservatives. I can't speak for any other church, but my experiences through the years, through the multiple churches I have been through, and not even just speaking about myself, but the numerous women and men and boys and girls that I have met over the years, it is not it is not an isolated incident anymore. It is an epidemic in the
Mm-hmm.
churches that needs to be handled. So just because, I mean, if we look at statistics, when it says 1 in 6 and 1 in 4 who have been abused,
Those are
not
reported
just physically but
cases.
sexually, those are reported cases, and the conservatives are not good at reporting. They try to hide and deal with things in their own churches, albeit they're getting better because people are learning to have a voice and they are tired of this, and they would like to keep tradition while outing abuse. And I appreciate that about the culture, that it is actually working towards that more. Yeah, just because it's not happening in your church doesn't mean that it's not. You just might not know about it.
Yeah.
So
Yes. I'm glad that you said
to have
that.
open hearts, yeah, have because it can be very discouraging. I was reading and I felt a little discouraged by a few of the comments by saying that Shalise is just picking the most extreme out there, and that is not the case. It's just that there's few willing to speak because of the public outcry that would happen for those, like, and that is why a lot of us who have left are finally finding the voice to speak, because those who are still trapped in it, when they speak, they're silenced.
Yeah. And I have to say, when it comes to the Mennonite stories and the Amish stories, and that's what you mean when you say conservatives, right? The Anabaptist churches.
Yeah, yeah, the Anabaptist churches, those are the only ones I can speak for.
Yeah. And for those who missed the first episode, she's been in a lot. We're not talking one or two. So she's been all over the country. So when it comes to those stories, I have yet to find someone who has left one of those groups who didn't have something horrible happen to them or horrible that they witnessed. So I don't even think I would have an option of picking a tame story, to be completely honest with you. Not to say that they don't exist, and I'm sure there are some people who have joyous lives, but like you're saying, I think it's very possible that they're just not seeing the abuse themselves. Either they choose not to, or their church is good at hiding it. Because what we have discovered through all these interviews is that the more of a grip you have on purity culture and over sexualizing women and little girls, the more abuse you will have. And so that's why we talk about this. That's why we're trying to expose it. We're not trying to demonize a whole group of people. We are not trying to make you look down on anyone who is in these churches. We just want to bring understanding and awareness to these issues so that we can maybe bring light to them, and maybe things can start to change if there's enough of an outcry, if there's enough of people who are standing up and going to the authorities, or like Mary is doing, going and speaking publicly about it. And there are just so many stories that need to be told. And also because the United States kind of has this fetishized, romanticized version of the Amish or the Mennonites in their brains. And so we just kind of want to bring that down a few notches and help them understand what's really going on in a lot of these groups. So thank you for saying that. I second it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all I have. That's my final thoughts.
Well, that was a great final thought. That was a great final thought. So leave your positive comments down below. And we really appreciate that. It helps the algorithm. If you want to support the podcast further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults2consciousness, or check out our merch at cults2consciousness.com. If you like this video, definitely check out our Amish and or Mennonite playlists. We have so many incredible interviews that you can, like we were just talking about, hear more about these groups and what's going on and what people are going through. And I will link 2 more specifically down here below for you to check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.